All right, gearheads, we just watched the qualifying for at Imola, and Max Verstappen pulled it out and got on pole ahead of the two McLarens. And we're going to break it all down for you here right now. This is John Massengale. I'm in the studio in Austin, Texas, and I'm joined by Jonathan Green and Bob Varsha. And Chris Medland is at Imola and will be joining us shortly. Jonathan Green, I'll start with you. Did you think Max was going to pull that out?
I kind of, in a weird way, I did, because everybody was focusing on, hang on one second, let me get rid of my, everybody was focusing on the upgrades that everybody else had made, but we forget that Red Bull had made a bunch of upgrades too. So, I guess what I'm saying is, even though, poor Friday, poor Saturday, it's typical Red Bull and typical Verstappen to pull it out in the last minute. So I kind of was half thinking, yeah, We've heard this all before.
Yeah, but Varsha, I tell you what, though, there's still hope for a really good weekend because the McLarens look fast and they're right there with Max.
No question. McLaren emerges in their continuing trend upward as the biggest threat to Verstappen in this race. And Jonathan made a great point there. Bad Friday, bad Saturday. Red Bull reportedly brought as big a package of upgrades as Ferrari. Ferrari seemed to have worked. Red Bull seemed to be all at sea on Friday and Saturday trying to get them to work. Verstappen was bitching left, right, and center about no turn in and la-di-da-di-da. Get to qualifying, Verstappen pulls it out as we're used to seeing him do. But I think it's Perez's performance that tells us where that team truly is with that car. He goes out in Q2. That hasn't happened for a long time, as Perez seems to have resurrected his role with the team. So I think Red Bull still has a lot to learn about this car, and Max Verstappen and Gianpiero Lambiase, his race engineer, everybody are going to have to be very conscious of that during the race because, gosh, the McLarens and even the Ferraris, so now they were a little bit off in qualifying after dominating early practice. Are just the sharks are circling, I guess. And Verstappen's going to have to be very careful, or they could find themselves on the back foot in this one.
Yeah, no doubt. And Jonathan, we saw a bunch of frustration from Max Verstappen all weekend, starting with Friday. I mean, he's not been happy with the car. So, I think that was part of why I was, not surprised, I should say. I was, I was hopeful that we could see somebody else on pole, honestly.
Yeah. No, I mean, we all are. We want to see the winds of change that we saw at Miami continue. And I think actually that may well be the case. I think that one lap wonder of Verstappen, and I think I agree with Bob totally here. I think the actual pace of that Red Bull is more with Perez's story than it is with Verstappen. I think Verstappen's ridden around whatever problems they've got. You can't hide Friday and Saturday. They happened. He wasn't happy. There's a lot going on behind the scenes. I think he drove, as he always does, as perfect a lap as he could do. And as you saw, even Tsunoda and Norris could have gone quicker in their Q2 times. So I think it's going to be competitive, as it was at Miami. But I think the truth is Red Bull have got a lot to work on. And Perez's position is probably more indicative of where Red Bull are. And I would be surprised if Verstappen does his usual, right, I'm off by 8 seconds. I'm off into the distance. I don't think that's going to happen tomorrow.
I don't think so either.
Yeah, and today's show, the Speed City Saturday on SiriusXM, is brought to you by CrowdStrike. Stop today's most sophisticated cyber attacks at the office, the racetrack, and everywhere in between. Learn more at crowdstrike.com/XM. Lots of good stories in this qualifying, though, guys. You talk about Checo being out, but look at Hülkenberg and Yuki Tsunoda. I mean, there's the whole field is so tight, isn't it?
Very tight. And you're right, Hülkenberg, they're starting to call him Mr. Saturday now because he just works wonders in qualifying with the Haas car.
I had a nice comment from Kevin Kelly, and he said, is Hülkenberg going to regret leaving Haas? I mean, we don't know how fast Kevin Magnussen could have been because he got blocked by Oscar Piastri, but Hulk looks very quick.
Yeah, I think Sauber.
Quick word on Tsunoda.
Yeah,
But
well,
also, we've been focusing, as we should, on the Sonoda Ricardo battle and whether Ricardo's got his mojo or he hasn't got his mojo. Maybe, actually, we should be focusing on Lauren Meckies and the RB. I mean, that car is starting to prove to be every bit a Red Bull Junior, and it's starting to look like the best midfield car there. And maybe it's not just Sonoda driving well and Ricardo getting fourth at Miami in the sprint. Maybe the car, the move forward has been the car itself. And actually, both drivers are now, getting to grips with it, and particularly today with Sonoda.
I think that's critical. Sonoda did well, but he has done well of late. We've been expecting that. But Ricardo gets into Q3 as well, and that's great. When was the last time you had one Red Bull and two RBs, the supposed junior team, in Q3?
Yep.
All right, we have Chris Medland, who is at Imola as we speak. Mr. Medland, how are you, sir?
I'm good, thanks. Chaps, how are you guys? I'm just going under the circuit in a tunnel right now, making my way into the paddock to see if we can doorstep anyone.
Oh, well.
There you go. That's what we want.
Swallowed up by the earth. I'm trying to remember where a tunnel was. I haven't been to Imola in many years, but
it's actually right under the start-finish line, or the end of the lane.
Where that tall building is.
Yeah. It's right under there.
Yeah, exactly next to that. Yeah, right by the iconic kind of old race control building that's at the end of the pit exit. So there's some porches out on track.
You must have been commentating them, because that's the commentary booth tunnel.
Sadly not. It's actually that they moved the media centre this year, kicked us out of our nice spot on the pit lane side, because hospitality pays a lot better than media does, and put us in some porter cabins and temporary building, very low level, no view of the track, but it's not too far away. It's just a brisk walk with some fans in the sun, so that's why soon I'll be out of breath.
Chris, do you have a Delta time? This is the longest pit lane of the year, and it looks extremely long. Do we have any idea? Give yourself an average 2.5 second pit stop. How long is it going to take you to get from in to out?
So I don't have a firm delta, but if it's the longest one of the year, it's going to be well over 20 seconds. We could be getting close to the 25-second mark. We actually get that data by the end of today, so it'll be one that I can give you a proper answer on in tomorrow's pre-race show. But yeah, I think you're probably looking around the 25-second mark. If I see anyone from a team that might answer that question while we're on air, whether I can get them to put it into the microphone or if I just pass on the info as if it's my own, I will do that.
Yeah, I think that could be a big factor in the race.
Mm. Yeah, and
absolutely. Sorry to jump in on that, but anything that the Formula 3 and Formula 2 races or anything to go by, you're going to need to do this on strategy. The start is going to be crucial, and then it's all going to be done on strategy, because it's so hard to overtake here. Unless you get a huge tyre delta, the only real overtaking spot is into the first chicane. And yeah, we've seen a lot of cars struggling to make passes earlier today in both F2 and F3.
Chris, before you joined us, we talked about Max Verstappen pulling it out, and which is funny to say for Max in qualifying this year, because he's qualified on pole for every race this year. But the fact that McLaren is so close, 74 thousandths for Piastri and 91 thousandths for Lando, they are right there in it.
Yeah, I actually tried to be brave, and I was sat in the media centre as Q3 started. In fact, it might have been, I think it was the start of Q3. And I said, Max is not going to be on pole. I'm speaking it into existence, because I felt like at no point this weekend did it feel like he was going to be on pole position. To have a chat to some people. Interesting. Max has got it there, but then he was quickest in Q1.
Now you're dropping out, Chris.
The old gremlin strikes again.
Yeah. Jonathan, but look how close Ferrari is. I mean, they're, in the 2024 new time measurements, the Ferrari's really not super close, but they are 4 and 5 today, right behind the McLarens.
well, we focused a lot on this weekend, or at least I have, on these Ferrari upgrades because they are quite significant and really interesting, actually, how they've done the side pods and let the air in and out and so on and so forth. It's quite a radical change. I was listening to what Jock Clear was having to say about those changes. He was trying to play them down, but the truth is it's quite radical for Ferrari. And I do think that right now McLaren have got the better part or the better handle on things than Ferrari. But I think that could change over the next few weeks. I think we're in for an almighty battle now between Ferrari and McLaren for runner-up spot, if not for wins. And I think they will get wins, both teams. And I think Mercedes have got some work to do to try and stay with them.
Yep.
And I agree. And I think the fact that they are so close at the top, you had two and a half tenths covering the top four cars. I mean, that's really tight.
Yeah, we've been seeing that all year, and it's just getting tighter. It seems like it. Chris, I know you had a little connection problem that I think you got it fixed.
That was the opposite of normal, where normally I'm chasing Wi-Fi outside to get connected. Well, this was that I had a good connection, and then some Wi-Fi kicked in, but it didn't work very well. But I'm actually stalking right now. I don't know how well this is going to go. But Peter Bayer, the CEO of RB, is just sending a few messages after a very strong qualifying performance for that team, as you were saying about the car, Johnny. So I'm going to see if when he's done, I assume congratulating the team back at the base, but I'll just see if Peter, let's get a quick word. What another strong day, both cars in Q3. The question we're asking in the studio is, how good is this car? What's the team done this year so far to really now step yourselves up with both cars in Q3?
Oh, it's hard work, every day finding hundredths of a second here and there. But initially the Miami upgrade was built for here really, but then given how tight the midfield fight was, we thought that we need to push harder, bring it to Miami, and we had a bit of additional data from Miami, which was helpful here. And then we've been building up over the weekend. We had Liam overnight in the sim, helping us with quite a bit of, especially for Daniel. And so very happy. Obviously, first time to have both cars in Q3 is an excellent achievement.
Yeah, we were joking when we get the submissions of new parts the teams bring to each race. There was only one team this weekend that didn't bring new parts, and it was RB, who are based 10, 15 miles down the road. You're the closest factory. But how impressive then is it what the team's doing to, I guess, out-develop some midfield rivals so far?
Yeah, well, it is a development race. It's an efficiency race. It's everybody has to see what he can do within the cost cap. And we were honestly the recent update, the Miami update is a big step forward, and it's mainly about confidence for the guys, in terms of download and downforce which it generates. And Yuki was probably had a bit of a head start because he was driving a TPC here in January, so knowing the track very well. And overall it is, it will continue like this probably until the very end. So, but for us, first of all, great work by the team. Now we really have to go back now, push hard overnight also to try and see what we can do for the race pace. Wasn't that great yesterday, the long run. So we'll have to make sure we get that under control and make the best out of the both cars in Q3.
Well, as you mentioned as well, or as I just mentioned, your home race, so close to the factory, a lot of team members here, huge fan following as well. What can they hope for tomorrow? Is it trying to get or keep both cars in the points? Because it's going to be tough to overtake, isn't it?
Definitely, yeah, it's tough to overtake. But the guys have done some good starts recently. We've been also focusing on that and, making sure that we give them maximum support and it's getting away, in the best possible way. And definitely both cars in the points is the target. We've got the pace, we've got the drivers, both of them, experienced enough. I mean, we've seen what Daniel can do in Miami when it's about defending, and we know that Yuki isn't any different. So it's clearly, we have the whole team here tomorrow, the whole factory team. We have our own grandstand down at the end of the start-finish straight. We have, I think it's about 500 people, all in a blue shirt. So it won't be the orange or the red army. It'll be the blue army that will celebrate, hopefully.
We look forward to seeing how they do, but well done today.
Thanks very much. Cheers.
That's Peter Bayer, the CEO of the RB team.
Well,
Nice
that tells you
work.
something about the importance of marketing in Formula One. I mean, 500 guests in the grandstand. I mean, that's a regular
Well, you think
weekend for
employees.
Formula One teams.
That's employees. Yeah, that's the whole team. They're the staff
Yeah.
that are coming.
Uh-huh. Because they're so
That is so
nearby.
cool. It
Yeah.
reminds me of the early days of Vettel.
Oh, of course,
What-
yeah. Sorry, for anyone making that link, when Toro Rosso
Yeah.
first were running Sebastian Vettel
Right.
in his rookie year, and there was quite a few times they were getting 4th, 5th, 6th places and strong points, weren't they? And obviously an amazing win at Monza.
That's right.
So there'll be lots of great attitude in the factory. And that's the more you learn about Formula One, the more you learn, or motor racing generally, the more you learn how critical that is. With regard to upgrades and parts, Ted Kravitz said something interesting during the Sky broadcast. We'll all recall that Logan Sargent had to step out of the Williams after Alex Albon crashed in, where was that, Australia, and they didn't have a spare chassis to build up. Kravitz mentioned that Aston Martin came here with a big package of upgrades and backup pieces for the upgrades, and I guarantee on top of that they had the pre-upgrade pieces in case they needed them if the upgrades didn't work as planned. So, that's the difference that budget and efficiency and good management and leadership in the team will bring you. I mean, you come loaded for bear against the Red Bulls and Ferraris and McLarens of the world. And,
All right. Well, let's get a quick break in, Bob. All right. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll be back after these quick messages. All right.
Having said that,
quick break, Bob. Sorry, we're having Casey's having some trouble. So, Casey, are we doing better? Okay. Okay. All right. Well, let's check out, see what we got on YouTube. We got TW, got Kevin Kelly, Joey Voice, Big Tuck TV, Applesauce 2.0. We don't have Applesauce 2.1. We had Andy P. Let's see what's going on out there. Yeah. TW says 2 ladies already signed with Audi already, talking about Hulkenberg. Mega.
That Andrea Seidel loves that.
Yeah. Yep. Mega Yuki and Hulk from Big Tuck TV.
Mm-hmm.
Andy P. Bottom line, this was a legit fight in qualifying. Yeah, that is a good point. It's the first time that Max was under real pressure. Race tomorrow, we could have 5 different winners. I like that. Yep. Let's see.
Not of the same race, though.
I do agree, though. I think it's certainly a 5-way fight because the Ferrari looked good on race pace on Friday and was upgraded, so they were, still had more work to do with that. And then both McLarens right there, very impressive. And without Checo being up there, Max could be vulnerable.
Yep.
All right. Planning scenarios in my head here. Yeah, there's interesting things can happen.
In the run to someone, but also strategically, if the 2 McLarens can even just slot in second and third, I think they've got the pace to just about stick with Max, and then it will come down to, who pits first.
Have there been a lot of Senna tributes this weekend? I saw the one on social media with Sebastian Vettel in his Senna T-shirt. Had a bunch of young people out there. He acknowledged the fact that it's been 30 years, and a lot of those people were born after Senna and Roland Ratzenberger were lost at Imola. Have there been a lot of that sort of thing on this 30th anniversary?
Yeah, there's been quite a lot, actually. If you want to talk about it on when we're back from break, I can go into some detail of there was a big group run earlier.
All right, here we go.
Hi, this is Karun Chandok, and you're listening to Speed City.
Welcome back to the fastest hour in radio, Speed City.
CrowdStrike presents Driven in 60 is the official cybersecurity partner of the Mercedes-AMG Petronas Formula One team. CrowdStrike protects against cyber threats so the team can focus on what matters, their next win. The revolutionary cloud-native unified CrowdStrike Falcon platform harnesses the speed and power of the cloud to protect and defend organizations of all sizes against increasingly complex threats, stopping breaches before they happen. Because on and off the track, the stakes couldn't be higher. A split second can make the difference between victory and defeat. When every second counts, protection shouldn't slow you down. It should fuel your momentum. CrowdStrike, protection at every turn. To learn more and to try CrowdStrike Falcon free today, visit crowdstrike.com/XM. All right, guys, we're going to continue to break down the Imola qualifying. It was great. It was close. It was tight. Max Verstappen had to pull it out. And let me just run down the order here. Max Verstappen on pole, followed by Oscar Piastri and Lando Norris, both just a few thousandths off Max Verstappen. Then the two Ferraris, Charles Leclerc, Carlos Sainz. Then George Russell in the Mercedes, Yuki Tsunoda in 7th in the RB, and the other Mercedes, Lewis Hamilton in 8th, Daniel Ricciardo in the other RB in 9th, followed by Nico Hulkenberg having a great qualifying in 10th. Then Sergio Perez, Esteban Ocon, Lance Stroll, Albon, Gasly, Bottas, Zhou Guanyu, Kevin Magnussen, Fernando Alonso, and Logan Sargent is the final order there. But guys, I think the theme here is how close it is and how competitive it is, and how we were talking during the break about we don't know that it's not inevitable that Max is going to win the race tomorrow.
Well, true that. With 6 different teams in the top 10, you can see how other teams are coming to the fore. And I agree that Max, as we said earlier in the show, is really going to have to be careful with that still unexploited, if you will, package of upgrades on the Red Bull. Ferraris are working great. McLarens are working great. Not so much the Red Bull, despite the genius of Max Verstappen.
Yep. And what do you think, Greeny? Hey, you're muted.
I read an article this morning about how we should take the 30,000 feet view of all of this. There is just 1.6% between the entire field in terms of lap times, and this is the closest in history since 1950 when the whole thing began. So that's how close things are. Yes, this is a dominant era for Red Bull, but it's even more dominant when the rest of the field is that close. When you think about it, to dominate in an era where you've got that percentage difference, it's not like the 80s or the 90s where there was dominance, but this is really, really close.
When was the last time the 107% rule was any kind of a factor? With that in mind, and spinning this forward, Red Bull's in an interesting position. We know that Adrian Newey is leaving. This week, he told the press that he does definitely plan to join another team. He's not ready to go off on gardening leave and drive his vintage race cars and sail his boat and all that kind of stuff. He wants to go back and do it again at age 65. Maybe get a 4th championship car out of his drawing board and pencil. And I saw an interesting comment from Mark Priestley, who's a former McLaren mechanic who does a lot of public speaking, a lot of commentary on Formula One subjects. And he said in this article that he knows a number of people on the Red Bull team who are also decided or at least mulling over the prospect of leaving the team. And he mentioned the team manager, Jonathan Wheatley, by name. So this could be the start of a major exodus at Red Bull, and then it becomes a real jump ball.
And I'm convinced this story, which as the news hound that I am, I still can't bury it. I still think all of the things that happened at the beginning of the season, i.e., Horner's texting, whatever you want to call it, problem, is still up in the air. I still think the Verstappens feel the same way, which is if Horner goes, and they think he should, that they could be on the way out, and that is up in the air. Helmut Marko will go too. Newey is gone. Red Bull could be rudderless. I'm serious. And I think it could be a huge change. Wheatley going. I really do think there's a lot going on behind the scenes that isn't being shown on track at the moment. And I'm amazed that this story has sort of been buried in the bottom of the headlines when it's going to come out in the public.
Now we got Chris Medland on the ground in Imola. Chris, what do you think about Jonathan's take on that?
Yeah, it's funny. I'm trying to stalk Christian Horner right now. Actually, he's doing a line of interviews. I'm just seeing if I can jump in at some stage, but I'm not ahead of the queue. Johnny's right. From what I understand, the appeal process that's been ongoing with the member of staff that lodged the complaint against Christian Horner is going to come to a head in the next week or two, I believe. So when there's a result from that, it's likely to bring it all to the fore again in some way, shape, or form. And that's when we could have more development. So whether that's good news for Christian Horner or not, I don't know at this point. But I think you're right that if it's not, or if it's something else that kind of rocks the team, that could be when we really see some decisive moves further up in terms of what Max Verstappen wants to do. But more and more people in the paddock, and I'm not talking media, but team members or other personnel, seem to be believing that there actually is a realistic chance that in 2025 you see Max Verstappen in a Mercedes rather than a Red Bull.
Yeah.
Wow. And I got to imagine that the Sharks are circling in terms of the other teams who might consider recruiting some of the people, some of those all-important, mechanics and designers and aerodynamicists and so on from Red Bull. If they're in a panic and people are willing to move on, that's a great conversation starter at the pub.
Absolutely. There's always a lot of movement between teams anyway. We've seen it recently with Ferrari announcing some arrivals from Mercedes. Mercedes similarly getting some from Ferrari. You tend to get that a lot where it's kind of once a few key members start moving, you have to make space for them somewhere. And it might mean other people think, oh, the ladder's closed to me. I need to go to another team to try and climb. So it's not unusual to see high levels of turnover like all at once. But I feel like that we could be certainly in that period around Red Bull right now. Zach Brown was saying that he's had loads of Red Bull CVs on his desk in recent weeks and months, but Christian Horner in Miami kind of dismissed that as, yep, but we also get loads of CVs on our desks. This is natural. People are always replying and seeing what's out there. So, the proof will be in the pudding, but Red Bull insists there won't be any changes around their technical team. And in many ways, that will be the key, won't it? That what's made Red Bull so dominant is the car they've been able to produce under these regulations. Now, how many of the technical team that have helped to build that car can they keep together moving forward? And if they can retain that, that gives them the best chance of remaining at the sharp end.
Hey, guys, we had Laura Mecky's on, Chris, a few minutes ago, but we also had a good showing, pretty good. And they're looking better and better as Alpine with Ocon in 12th and Gasly in 15th. I know that's not super impressive, but they have looked better, haven't they?
Absolutely. They made a step forward, didn't they? In Miami, we saw it, actually. I think they finally got the car down to the weight limit. It had been heavily overweight, and they got that resolved. And then beyond that, they managed to... sorry, I'm just flagging down the fact that I'd like to speak to Christian Horner a second. On top of that, they brought an upgrade. So that was like a double whammy of progress. But speaking of weight issues as well, something that people need to bear in mind when we talk about Williams and Logan Sargent is that Alex Albon has a lighter floor here. So it's the same design of floor as Williams had previously, but it is much, much lighter. They used a different material to manufacture it, but they only were able to manufacture one in time for this weekend. So it's only on Albon's car, not on Sargent's. So Sargent automatically is at a deficit performance-wise before he's even got out on track. So he ended up having his best lap time deleted today, Logan Sargent, but it was 0.2 of a second, the gap for that. And before I go on another rant, that's a big surprise that we're even having track limits issues because this is a self-policing circuit. There's gravel everywhere. So I don't quite understand why we're doing that. But anyway, argument for another day. But Sargent looked actually pretty promising before he lost that lap time.
Jonathan, let's give Chris a break so he can see if he can get Christian Horner. But there's been some changes to the curbs and gravel and all that, hasn't there, Jonathan?
Yeah. Imola, if you've ever been, it's a tough one because, and this was the whole paradox of 94, in that when Senna's accident happened, there were a lot of reasons that, circumstances, etc. But the biggest thing that Imola has is a river right behind the paddock and right behind Tamburello. And so obviously you can't move that river. And it's also in this old gladiatorial sort of space with a hill above.
Sorry to cut you off, Johnny, especially as you're painting such a lovely picture of Imola, which is a picture state, lovely and sunny. And I don't know if this is relief on Christian Horner's face because it's looked like a tricky weekend for Red Bull, but Max pulled it out today in qualifying.
Yeah, it was a great turnaround. I mean, we were not in a happy place with the car yesterday, and the team worked very hard overnight, putting in late, long hours both here and back in the factory in Milton Keynes. Sebastian Buemi on the simulator until the early hours of this morning, and I think we've managed to improve the car for P3. We've improved it again for going into quali, and Max immediately felt more at home, and then obviously has delivered one of the best poles of his career, I would say.
I was going to say, because when you got Checo dropping out in Q2, is that actually a sign of how much it was the driver's performance putting that lap together today with Max?
The driver was outstanding. I mean, Checo was unlucky because he made a mistake in the first chicane and in the first sector. So he was then on the back foot for the rest of the lap. He was finding the time all the time, but unfortunately, what he'd given away early on, the lap wasn't long enough to make back. But 11th place, he can still race well from there.
It looks like a tough place to overtake, though. So how key is it that Max is at the front? And also then, strategically, how much threat is there from McLaren and Ferrari behind?
But they're going to be quick in the race tomorrow. I mean, the McLarens are fast, Ferraris are fast. So we've got to be at the top of our game to convert this amazing pole, into victory tomorrow. So, it's a great track. It's a special place to come and race. I've always got very fond memories here. I had my first ever victory as a team principal here back in Formula 3000 in the year 2000. So I always enjoy coming to Imola.
Nearly a quarter of a century ago,
making me feel I was very young when I got that first win.
Just finally though, is it a pressure situation now for Red Bull? Are you under attack here from McLaren and Ferrari? Has the gap really closed?
We're always under attack, so nothing's new. It's all you do is focus on yourself and keep pushing. And McLarens are quick, Ferraris are quick, and this calendar, the circuits vary so much. I mean, next weekend we're on the streets of Monaco, and trying to be quick across all of those venues is obviously the major challenge.
Well, we look forward to seeing how it plays out tomorrow. Christian, thanks for your time.
All right, great job, Chris. All right, let's get a quick break in. You're listening to Speed City F1 on SiriusXM. We'll be back after these messages. Chris, you mentioned a minute ago the proof's in the pudding, and then Jonathan got hungry when you said that and started eating his breakfast. And who was it? Joe of Oyster Bay says, Jonathan seems very comfortable in front of a camera.
Well, I would hope so by now, for crying out loud. How many years do you have to do this?
Usually I don't get to eat.
Well, there's a great point there about the track at Imola, and Jonathan painted a nice picture. The Santerno River makes it difficult to adjust. I always felt
that's where I was going.
I always felt aggrieved by the events of 1994 because it's such a wonderful town, and if you want a bigger city, Bologna is right down the road. The track is just wonderful. I always bitch about rovals, infield road courses that go nowhere. That's not road racing. Road racing has to make you feel like you're going somewhere from A to B and not just A back to A. And Imola, to me, is one of those tracks. Every corner is different. The vistas are beautiful. You have big ups and downs, and it's really road racing. And I hate that stain is on its record when we lost Ratzenberger and Senna.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Great. And that's all I was going to say was that river makes every difference as to how you can change the gravel tracks. They've tried everything in the past. If I'm brutally honest, it's too small an area for modern Formula One, but they've done a hell of a job of adjusting for it, and they keep doing so.
That's funny, Jonathan. That's exactly what Joe of Oyster Bay on YouTube says. He says, I'm looking at Imola on Google Earth. They use every square foot. There are paddleball courts inside, people living inside the track, clay tennis courts, farmland, all that.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's road racing.
Yeah, just ask Chris. That paddock that he's in right now is minute.
Here we go. Coming back.
Yeah, it's tiny.
Hello, I'm Jenny Gow from BBC F1. You are listening to Speed City.
Welcome back to the fastest hour in radio, Speed City.
CrowdStrike presents Driven in 60 as the official cybersecurity partner of the Mercedes-AMG Petronas Formula One team. CrowdStrike protects against cyber threats so the team can focus on what matters to their next win. A revolutionary cloud-native unified CrowdStrike Falcon platform harnesses the speed and power of the cloud to protect and defend organizations of all sizes against increasingly complex threats, stopping breaches before they happen. Because on and off the track, the stakes couldn't be higher. A split second can make the difference between victory and defeat. When every second counts, protection shouldn't slow you down. It should fuel your momentum. CrowdStrike, protection at every turn. To learn more and to try CrowdStrike Falcon free today, visit crowdstrike.com/XM. All right, I'm going to go to you, Jonathan Green. What do you think about we were talking about how fast Hulkenberg was, and I don't know how fast Magnussen was looking because his lap got interrupted. I wanted to ask you, what do you think of that? Should there have been a penalty there? Should there, could there still be?
Yes, I think there will be. I actually do, given what's happened to Magnussen in the last few weeks as well. I think karma's a strange thing, but he's had a tough time of it. But this time he was wronged, and his lap was taken away. They can't take that lap back. They can't give him any more track time, so they have to penalize Piastri. It's all there is to it. I think anyway. And I feel for Magnussen because he really does need a good weekend. Time's moving on. His teammates been employed. The pressure's on him now to perform.
And Chris, do you think it's inevitable that Magnussen is going to break that threshold and get a race ban?
Ooh, almost, yes. Partly because if you look, he's going to get through the whole season and the first 2 races of next year, realistically, without picking up 2 points. Now, 2 points is one little collision with another car that, if you look at the one with Sargent, he thinks the way he's racing there, that he's putting the car in a position that he's going to be allowed some space, and he's misjudged it. No one's intentionally having a crash. And he was in the wrong there. He didn't get enough of his car alongside. But there might be other times where, again, it's just a judgment call in a split second at nearly 200 mile an hour, and you get it marginally wrong, and you're going to pick up another penalty. So, I'd be amazed if I'm very impressed, to be honest, if he avoided one. But also, I said that he might have to get through the first quarter races next year. From the vibe I'm getting, he won't need to do that because he might not be on the grid next year. I think he's looking ever more shaky, actually, to stay with Haas. The name Yuki Tsunoda and Haas has really picked up some momentum this weekend. Zhou Guanyu as well, linked with that seat, but I don't believe there's that much momentum behind that one. And with Ollie Behrman almost certainly going to go in there, I think Magnussen could be in trouble here in terms of staying with Haas. And I just don't see a natural fit for him anywhere else either.
Varsha, we saw that Behrman drove already FP1 in Magnussen's car.
Yeah, I was going to bring that up. I mean, Ollie Behrman suddenly is a very a looming figure, I would say, anywhere within a Ferrari-associated team. He was so impressive in Saudi Arabia, where he replaced Carlos Sainz. And he drove in FP1, part of his Friday program, as all the young aspiring drivers do. And he's got to be in the picture, I would think, for Haas next year. They know they've lost Hulkenberg. Magnussen, I agree with what Chris has been saying, is on very shaky ground. And the team has to be prepared, as soon as next week to put somebody else in that car. If Magnussen somehow comes a cropper on Sunday in Imola, they may need him somebody from Monaco.
Yeah, so Behrman will be in Monaco because he'll be racing in F2. But I also learned on Thursday that Behrman will also be in Canada, even though it's not racing there, as the Ferrari and Haas reserve. So he's fulfilling that role. And I think Ferrari, after the performance in Jeddah, have kind of stepped that up a little bit and said, he's the guy we can trust to put in the car at late notice. So let's get him to as many races as we can in that reserve role. So he's ready to go if needed, and said that he's proven in Saudi Arabia that he can handle that situation with any team if needed.
Well, let's talk about the race tomorrow, Jonathan. Look, we're seeing that we talked about it. McLaren's fast, and they're right on Max's heels, and so is a Ferrari. But what else for tomorrow? Well,
Chris alluded to this already because of F2 and F3. It's going to be strategy. There's nowhere to overtake. There's a strong possibility of rain, which makes Imola really tough. yes, Monaco's coming up, but we used to joke about Imola being Monaco without the walls in terms of the precision that you need to be fast around there is ridiculous. Absolutely.
And
ridiculous.
it's weird because the track map and looking at the TV pictures wouldn't suggest that. I mean, the track looks plenty wide and a lot of sweeping corners and such, but it's just the sheer configuration. You don't have enough time to get on somebody's tail and get them in a braking area and so forth. You got one chance basically down in turn one.
Yeah, and how many times have we seen the gravel come into play? I mean, the cars have been in and out of gravel all weekend.
Yeah, that's another interesting thing is gravel. I mean, a couple of years ago, all anybody wanted to talk about was asphalt on the overruns, and now it's back to gravel.
Yeah, that's been a change this weekend here. Oh, well, since we last here racing anyway. So a lot of the runoffs, the Variante Alta, which is the chicane at the end of the second sector where Perez crashed in FP3 today, that used to have tarmac runoff, and now it's back to a gravel trap. They've brought gravel traps closer at Piratella as well, the fast left-hander at the top of the hill. But as you guys were just saying, this is a track that's so quick. It's so high speed in terms of, there's hardly any low-speed corners, and you've got to get that precision right, because if you get it wrong, a little snap of oversteer, there's nowhere to gather it up. You're straight into the gravel and maybe into the barrier. And we saw a lot of safety cars in Formula 2 and Formula 3 earlier today. I think we could see a few tomorrow in the F1 race. The weather looks like it's improving, according to my phone, but it has been up and down. And it's looking like it might be dry tomorrow now. I think it'd be great if it was wet. It would be chaotic. It would open up overtaking opportunities. But it looks like, as you guys have all said, turn one is the main one, or the start certainly, and then down to strategy as well. So, I mean, stranger things have happened where suddenly just the way that cars are set up, they manage to overtake each other, but it doesn't feel like it's going to be that here. And Fernando Alonso, I don't think we've really spoken about it much on the show, but he's starting right at the back after a really tough day. He actually said that there was a car issue in Q1 after the team repaired his car after he crashed. Then there was an issue that he doesn't know what the problem was, but he was told to pit, came into the box, couldn't run again in Q1, so dropped out. And he said this is the second hardest circuit on the calendar to overtake. He said Monaco's the hardest, here's the second hardest. Even Singapore is easier to overtake according to all the data they have. So, he's got a long afternoon ahead, I think.
That's exactly what you were saying, Jonathan. Yeah, and what's going on with the Aston Martin? Well, look, first of all, they were still working on Alonso's car with 5 minutes to go, Chris, something like that. And I mean, they're having all sorts of issues, it seems like right now, keeping the car quick.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, around Alonso, obviously, because he had that crash and then they had to do the repairs after FP3. Alonso said they did a great job. Both car crews were working on it. But obviously something wasn't quite configured right or wasn't set right, because they did tell him he had to park it when he was in the danger zone, so he wasn't going to make it through. And it has been interesting that their development rate's been better than last year, but it's still not quite as strong as those around them. They brought a lot of new parts here this weekend, and we didn't really see anything during any practice session that said it was a clear step forward compared to the Ferrari upgrade or even where McLaren's now at. The only other team that seem to be struggling the same way is Mercedes. They just seem to start strongly and drop away every time, and it was the same again today. Both drivers were within, I think, 30 thousandths of a second of dropping out in Q2. That's not where they should be, really.
No, and that's the other side of the coin when it comes to big upgrades. They're working for McLaren, they're working for Ferrari, maybe they're working for Red Bull, but they definitely aren't working for Mercedes and for Aston Martin.
Yeah, I was thinking about which teams are smiling, which teams are not. Kind of Red Bull is kind of split right now. Obviously, McLaren's smiling. Ferrari's probably, Mercedes, no. We talked about Alpine and RB, but Williams also, it's not all smiles there right now, is it?
No, not at all. And, Sargent's merry way out of Formula One is continuing, unfortunately. This sort of chat about Antonelli has died down after Miami, but I think it's inevitable now. I mean, the guy cannot. He is the slowest man in Formula One at the moment, for whatever reason. Like I said, the Williams has got two different chassis and all the rest of it. But the bottom line is Sargent is not cutting, unfortunately.
What's your take on that, Chris?
James Vowles has actually been pretty blunt about that as well, and said he's told Sargent that he's at risk. And that he needs to perform better, that it's a meritocracy and he needs to show the steps that he's outlined in terms of performance gains as quickly as possible. And if he manages to do that, then there is a chance he can keep his seat. He said, the door is not closed. We have not made a decision. And he's made that very clear to him, and he's publicly said it. But at the moment, he's basically saying he's not doing enough right now. But he also says they're not expecting or planning to make a change during the season. He's looking at the driver lineup for 25, 26, and 27. That's why they're looking at Antonelli, but they're looking at others. Carlos Sainz linked with that. Valtteri Bottas, I think, went in for a meeting today. He could go back and work with valves again. There's a lot of good options for Williams, especially if the Mercedes power unit is as strong in 2026 as some are suggesting it could be, which is always a bit of a gamble to say certainly, but they are the noises are pretty positive coming out of Mercedes around that development. So I think a lot of people would want to go and drive for Williams as an option as a Mercedes-powered customer. And that means that for next year, people will be knocking on the door wanting to be in the seat. And that adds even more pressure to Sargent, because it's not just about him getting an opportunity. It's when you look at it in the context, a year ago, there weren't really better options to put in there. And he deserves a second chance to develop into his second year. Now, some of the options are very, very strong, and he has to do something pretty remarkable to hold on to it, I think.
Yeah, and Chris, that's a change in wording that James Vowles used. He said, we had a direct conversation, he and Logan Sargent, and which was a very hard conversation. This is a simple matter of the fact that he is at risk. That's a matter of fact. And that's something he's always been, kind of dancing around that, but that's a change in wording. So I think, but again, I don't, like you said, it may not happen this year.
No, I don't think it's going to be this year as it stands. But it partly because, as we talked about earlier, if there is movement potentially for Verstappen to go to Mercedes, that's not going to happen all that quickly. And Mercedes will wait for that. Then they'll know, okay, there's no space for Antonelli right now, and they might start looking at somewhere else for Antonelli. But kind of that Verstappen thing needs to play out before there'll be any certainty around what's happening with Antonelli. And Mercedes seem pretty keen not to rush him into F1 this season at the moment. So, I think Logan's going to get, certainly it's at least Monza, because that's when Antonelli turns 18. But realistically, if he can perform solidly, he should get the rest of the year at least, but it'll be very tough to get beyond that.
Yeah. All right, guys, we are just about out of time. Go ahead, Bob. One last comment.
Well, I was just going to say it's such an interesting process whether a guy gets a continued chance in Formula One. I mean, look at Hulkenberg now holds the record, 209 starts without a win. Lando Norris went 110 starts before he did win. Nigel Mansell went 100 starts. Mika Hakkinen went 100 starts without winning a race, and yet they always had a seat. So it's a very different kind of equation in terms of what kind of talent you've got, what's the general landscape, the big picture look like, as Chris was just explaining, and the results speak for themselves.
All right, guys, we're out of time, but don't forget to join us tomorrow. Our coverage will start at 8 a.m. Eastern time, and we'll have our pre-race show for an hour. And then, of course, we'll have the full race coverage for you right here on Channel 81, SiriusXM Extra Channel, ESPN Extra Channel, and then followed by our 1 hour post-race show immediately after the race. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in, and we will talk to you tomorrow.
Happy trails.
Cheers.